All right. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Mashpee Conservation Commission Quarterly Update Meeting for Thursday, November 20th, 2025. We're in the Coit Meeting Room at Mashpee Town Hall, 16 Great Neck Road North, broadcast live on local cable channels 8 and 1072, stream live on the Town of Mashpee website, and it's a hybrid remote meeting. So first item, if you join me for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay. So I was going to ask for public comment, but I don't see anybody in the audience. So the first item we're going to jump into is under discussion presentation from Mass Tech on an IA septic technology. And Brian, here to show us some new septic technology.
All right. Thank you for inviting me to come and talk this evening. I have a couple slides to show. Oop. If somebody could enable me to screen share.
I'm going to try, but I keep getting this message saying host disable and participant screen sharing, and I did not disable it. And I'm not sure how to fix that.
Huh.
Share Alt 5 or Alt S. Try that. This keeps coming up with the same message.
Well, that's, I can just talk.
Okay.
Okay.
That's what you're
The
gonna have
slides
to
are
do.
just visuals, yeah. I'm Brian Baumgartel, Director of the Barnstable County Department of Health and Environment's Clean Water Center, also known as the Wastewater Division. We are a program that encompasses really three main programs. MASTC, which is the Massachusetts Alternative Septic System Testing and Technology Center, which is mostly what we'll be kind of focusing in on tonight. Cape Cod Aqua Fund, which is our low-interest loan program to help homeowners replace their failed or failing on-site wastewater treatment septic systems. And our newer program, which is called the Septic Utility Program, which is intended to help homeowners to maintain and monitor those systems that may end up going in the ground. Those three programs are sort of the core of what we do within our division. And I can give you a little bit more detail on each of those as well, but I kind of wanted to just jump right into kind of a discussion of the basic technologies that are available. Let me just see if this will work one more time, because the visuals are just so helpful. That's all right. So the first thing we usually talk about is infrastructure in terms of wastewater treatment. There are a couple ways that we can do that when we're looking at a particular watershed, right? The one that we're probably most familiar with is a sewering project, and we're in Mashpee, we're engaged in two pretty big projects at this point, being phase 2 of the main sewering project and the new remote system that was approved at town meeting recently. Most people think of sewers as infrastructure, and they don't think of some of the other options as being infrastructure, but they really should be considered as such. And what I mean by that is, whereas a sewer brings all of the wastewater from a particular area to a central location where it's treated and disposed of, when you're talking about on-site wastewater treatment systems, particularly the advanced technologies we're here to talk about tonight, what you're moving is not water from place to place. What you're moving is people and information from place to place. So the wastewater is treated on site, it's disposed of on site, and you have to send out staff to go and make sure that the systems are functioning, right? With a centralized sewer plant, they're just there. With on-site systems, you're really sending people out into the world to maintain and monitor those systems. So there's a lot of similarities between the two, main paradigms. There's a couple different types of distributed or decentralized wastewater infrastructure. We have single on-site systems where you have a home with a single system, which is fairly typical of what we see. There are also what are called cluster systems, where you may have 5, 10, 15 homes connected to one larger facility, but still generally, fairly small. We're not really talking like packaged treatment plant or anything like that. We're talking still fairly small scale, decentralized treatment systems. The third type of infrastructure that we like to talk about is what's called ecological sanitation infrastructure. And if you followed what's going on in Falmouth with their eco toilet project, what we're talking about in this case is urine diversion, composting toilets, incinerating toilets, et cetera, where the material is handled very locally to where it's produced. And in that case, looking at it from the infrastructure paradigm again, whereas centralized treatment brings water to one's place, decentralized treats water in a location, disposes of it, and you're moving people. With ecological sanitation, depending on what you're using, if you're using like urine diversion, which if you're not familiar with that, it's where there are specialized fixtures which go into the home and separate urine from the wastewater stream. So rather than putting it where we end up having to treat it later on, it actually separates it out and puts it into an entirely different treatment pathway. Why do we want to do that? Well, if you look at the base numbers, urine accounts for probably 80 to 85% of the nitrogen in our wastewater stream, and about the same worth of phosphorus. So a good chunk of the nitrogen that we're putting into our estuaries every day comes from our urine. And if we have the opportunity to split that off and side stream it into a different treatment process where we could potentially reuse it, because we're talking about nitrogen and phosphorus. Anybody who does gardening knows that every bag of fertilizer has 3 numbers on the front. That's a nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium number. Urine is heavy in all of those. So there's been a lot of work recently with a group called the Green Center down in Falmouth, as well as the Rich Earth Institute up in Vermont, to look at this paradigm and see if it can be turned more mainstream, if it's possible to manage it in a better way. And we're working with the town of Falmouth to try to develop that management infrastructure that would go with that. So in that case where we're talking about urine diversion, the infrastructure is really transporting that material to a central location where it could be treated and then potentially reused for agricultural purposes.
Brian, do you mind if we ask questions?
You can, if you'd like to ask questions as I go along, that's fine.
So in that situation with this urine diverting, and you're talking about diverting to a common place, is it as big a project as a sewering project? Or is it something that you can cluster and make effective?
That's something through our department, we have a grant with Mass DEP right now. It's a 319 grant to install a number of urine diversion fixtures in homes, and actually try to figure out that back-end management infrastructure piece to see what is the cost associated with installing the fixtures in the first place, and making modifications to the plumbing. What is the cost associated with transporting that and turning it into fertilizer, and then the cost associated with bringing it somewhere for disposal. Those are things that are at this point unanswered, because up until more recently, urine diversion has been a very niche thing, right? It hasn't gained a lot of popularity until more recently in this big push in Falmouth to look at it more closely. When you look at it in terms of cost per house, the numbers that I do have for that technology of, doing the installation in a house, which is the fixture and a tank for storage, right? An average 1-bedroom home, the cost is probably somewhere around $10,000 to $15,000 all in and putting a fixture and the tank in. We don't, on
top of the rest of the septic system.
Well, the idea,
home, or you still have to handle
You still have gray water.
Yeah, you still
Yep.
have gray water and,
Yep, and,
Poop,
and
right?
yes, you do.
Yeah.
Yep, you do. That could go through the standard existing Title V system that's already there. So basically, you're, instead of putting that in through your title, the urine through your Title V system, you're side streaming it and storing it for later treatment and reuse.
so you think it'd be practical, I'm just thinking about places where we haven't been able to sewer in Mashpee, which has been, you know, the challenges, the ups and downs and the cost of running pipe is, you think there might be a workaround to those for this? Okay.
That's why we're aggressively pursuing it, because, I mean, I think our job at the county with this program is to really to suss out all the information we can about everything that's not sewer, right? Because we know the numbers for sewer. We're focused on, like, what about the IE systems? What are the costs? What about urine diversion? What are the costs associated with that?
Cool.
So that's really what this program is, and we're moving very quickly towards trying to get these first pilot technologies installed so that we can really start to collect some hard data and answer those big questions about it. I think, you know, on paper, it definitely holds a lot of promise, right? Because if we can take 85% out of the nitrogen we have to deal with and potentially turn it into a usable product, and there are actually in existence registered urine-derived fertilizer products in Massachusetts already. There are some companies that are doing this. So the pathways are there. A lot of it is really just figuring out the regulatory piece of how we get it from point A to point B at this point. What are the costs associated with that? So maybe at some point in the future we can come back and give you harder numbers on that back-end infrastructure piece. You know, I see urine diversion isn't going to be for everybody, right? Because it's different from what we're used to. It requires some different fixtures in the home, those kinds of things. So I look at it as it's not sewering versus IA systems versus eco-sanitation. It's really, they're complementary to one another, right? So maybe a property does have sewer and they want to do urine diversion. So now you're removing that nitrogen piece from the treatment plant, right?
Same as like solar panels versus being on the grid full-time, right?
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So we can take some of that, do beneficial reuse with it. We could still do sewer and that. We could do, you know, we can use IA systems here, sewer here, urine diversion here. So it's really like looking at the full scope of what we need to accomplish and kind of just talking about what we should be using where.
More tools in the toolbox.
Exactly, yeah. So adding tools to the toolbox is the way I usually talk about it. So to kind of focus on on-site technologies, I have some great visuals for this that you're not going to be able to see, but I'll look at them here. So when we talk about nitrogen removal in an on-site system, I really like to start with what happens with nutrients in a standard system. So we have a standard systems composed of, as most of us know, a septic tank and a soil absorption area or leach field. And that's a standard Title V system. So you have wastewater coming into the septic tank. In a septic tank, typically what we see for phosphorus is about a 25% removal of the phosphorus just in the solid material. Most of the nitrogen, actually all the nitrogen passes through. It transforms from urea into ammonia, but it's still the same mass of nitrogen that comes out of the end of a septic tank. The soil absorption area is really where the nitrogen treatment piece of this all comes in. A standard Title V system is really good at taking that ammonia that's coming in, turning it to nitrate. And it's basically, for the most part, that's where a standard Title V system stops. If you have, you know, a slug of ammonia coming in, almost all of that will be converted to nitrate, and most of that it'll end up going into our groundwater, which causes the problem we have. There is some nitrogen removal in a standard system, though. We see about 35% removal in a standard leach field, and that's where that 26.25 number that kind of feeds into all the models and all the stuff that the SMAST models. A lot of that is really derived off of that. What is assumed to be coming into a septic tank, and then taking about 30 to 35% off of that number, and saying the rest of that is going into ultimately into the watershed. Soil absorption areas, as they exist now, are very poor for phosphorus removal. So that 25% removal of phosphorus in the solids in the septic tank is about all the removal we get in a standard system for phosphorus. When you first put a system in, you get a little bit of legacy phosphorus removal because the soil has not absorbed very much phosphorus yet, so there's some capacity in a new system, but it decreases over time. There's only so much that it can actually hold on to, right? Phosphorus is coming in, it's kind of just getting stuck there, and, you know, kind of like a pudding, and there's only so much room to be able to hold raisins in a pudding, right? So the rest of it makes its way through into the watershed. And it's somewhere around 75% of the incoming phosphorus ends up going through to groundwater. If we talk about first black box technologies, so these are like biomicrobics fast systems or BioClears, any kind of IA technology that's a tank that you're dropping in. So kind of looking at that same pathway from start to finish, septic tank takes about 25% of the phosphorus out. The IA technology is where most of the magic happens in terms of nitrogen removal. And for the best performing systems, we're seeing probably 85 to 90% nitrogen removal or better. And these are the newer technologies that we've seen come along. So you've probably seen fast systems and BioClears come across your desk at some point. Those are older technologies. Those technologies were originally designed really to focus in on BOD and TSS removal, like the basic wastewater treatment things that we're trying to remove, right? It just so happened that they did remove some nitrogen, about half or so. So they kind of got shoehorned into a job they were never really designed to do. And that's where most of the data that we have says, well, IA systems as a category probably aren't going to solve our wastewater problems. Within the last 5 to 7 years, though, technologies have been coming along that are more focused on nitrogen removal. The first one that's kind of been in existence for a while is what's called Nitrex. It's a company manufactured by Lombardo Associates. I believe they're located in Newton, Massachusetts. That one was actually invented in the mid-2000s and removes, if you look at the data across the few sites that actually exist for that technology, it averages probably somewhere around 85 to 90% nitrogen removal. It works well, but there just through the last couple decades, that company hasn't had a lot of success with getting more installations out into the world. So it's been a little bit stalled. The next black box technology that has been a more recent invention is what's called the Nitro, N-I-T-R-O-E system by a company called Clean2, K-L-E-A-N-T-U. They're located over in, I think they're in Tisbury, actually, but they're over on the Vineyard, if I'm wrong on the town. Pick one of the other ones, and that's where they're from. That technology, again, we see 85 to 90% removal, and it's a much simpler, more deployed technology. So to sort of back up and talk about why it's important to get more systems out into the world. If you're familiar with the way DEP approves systems, they start with a piloting approval, which lets you do 12 systems and kind of demonstrate that they're not going to do any harm, right? Like that's the point of pilot, is just to say this isn't worse than putting in a standard system. And that gets the company permission to install more systems out into the world. When it comes to nitrogen removal, provisional approval is where the real business starts. So they have to install at least 50 systems and monitor all 50 of those systems for 3 years. You have to have a full 3 years of data for 50 systems for DEP to take that and to give them a general approval for nitrogen removal. And it's at that point when DEP will look at the 50 system 3-year data set and say, we are comfortable with saying that this system removes X amount of nitrogen, and they'll give you a concentration. So if you look at the provisional approvals, because the two technologies I've talked about, Nitrex and Nitro, at this point are still provisional use technologies. They haven't yet received general use approval. But they'll look at that data. So for the Nitrex system, the provisional approval for that technology is 10 milligrams per liter as an effluent versus 19, which is what we're typically talking about for IA technologies, right? These older technologies. For the Clean 2 system, it's 11 milligrams per liter. Clean 2 is much further ahead in that process of getting approval. They are, I would say, probably nearly done with their provisional. They have somewhere around 200 systems installed between the Cape and the Vineyard at this point. And they're just finishing up data collection on the last couple of systems for the 3 years. So I anticipate the DEP would be issuing a general approval for that technology within the next 6 to 9 months. I would be surprised if it takes much longer than that. As I said, the provisional approval for that technology right now is 11 milligrams per liter. I don't know what DEP is going to assign it once it gets to general until they've done that data analysis. But if you look at the performance of the nitro systems that are in the ground now, that 200 or so, they're averaging probably somewhere around 7 to 8 milligrams per liter for effluent. So you could probably, if you look at the DEP numbers, if you're trying to make a determination of like, we want to, you're kind of talking about where you want to go with your regulations in the future and thinking about, should we be doing better than 19? Probably your safest bet is to look at DEP's best available nitrogen reducing technology list and go off of their approval levels for those particular technologies. So as I said, nitro is at 11, nitrex is at 10. If you look at like what Falmouth has been doing through their Board of Health, I think they set a limit at 12 milligrams per liter. So that just, it kind of sets an upper bound, and we're not talking about those older technologies that don't perform where we need them to go, right? So the 19 milligram per liter performers are kind of knocked out. But it sets a limit that is inclusive of at least a couple of technologies that have been more successful and are further along in the process of getting approval. So that's as an example, that's what Falmouth has done, is a 12 limit.
What about the sledgehammer system that a couple of the engineers that we deal with are using?
Looking at the sledgehammer technology, you will not find sledgehammer on DEP's best available nitrogen reducing technology list. So that should tell you something. And looking at the way that technology functions, I am hard pressed to say that it could remove nitrogen to the same levels as some of the others. And I have to be very careful about discussing specific technologies like that, but the data speaks for itself.
Okay, thanks.
And those two, some more recent technologies, the nitrex and nitro systems, how do they differ from the older ones like FAST and BioClear without you divulging?
No, it's not really a closed secret. They rely on wood chips for nitrogen removal. So to walk through the basic process, septic tank, it readily takes ammonia or urea, turns it to ammonia. The first part of just about every nitrogen removal process is to turn that to nitrate, right? So Title V systems, as I said, great at turning stuff into nitrate. That's typically handled in a black box technology by aeration of wastewater. It's a major component of just about every system, and a lot of systems are great at taking ammonia and turning it to nitrate, right? It's an aerobic process. We just create the environment for those bacteria to do what they do. The denitrification part, where we take nitrate and turn it to nitrogen gas, is the more difficult piece of that process. So nitrification and then denitrification. So it relies on two things: anaerobic conditions, which are pretty easy to provide. So you just take away all the oxygen that was there, so that they try to actually respire and breathe, basically, the nitrate that's coming into the system. And those bacteria also need a carbon source. They're heterotrophic bacteria. We're all heterotrophs. We have to eat to grow, right? We can't fix carbon from the atmosphere. So those bacteria need a carbon source. If you look at the more historic technologies, they all relied on the incoming carbon from the wastewater to do the best they could, right? But if you look at the balance of the amount of nitrogen coming in and the amount of carbon coming in, there's just not enough carbon for full denitrification in most of those aerobic technologies. So if you look at FAST, BioClear, Sledgehammer, some of the single-family amphidrome systems, most of those technologies, because there's no additional carbon source, they're going to hit a hard wall. And that wall is probably somewhere around 17 milligrams per liter. If you look at the paucity of data, and we have tens and hundreds of thousands of data points for all of these technologies, it really says that 17 is about the limit that you can get with a standard aeration technology with recycle and relying on that incoming carbon from wastewater. What makes these other technologies different is they provide wood chips as a carbon source for those bacteria. So we're not just reliant on the incoming carbon from the wastewater, they're actually giving them a carbon source to feast on. And that is really the magic sauce of those technologies. Now they have as much carbon as they could possibly want, and they can turn that nitrate to nitrogen gas almost completely. During the summer with some of these technologies, Nitrex, Nitro, and I haven't talked about the layer cake technologies that George Hoyfelder at the test center has been developing for a number of years. All of those technologies in the middle of summer, you can easily get 3 milligrams per liter, starting from 80 in a typical household down to 3 milligrams per liter for most of those technologies. Winter performance is not as good because, like us, we all slow down in the winter, right? Like I feel lethargic in the winter. Bacteria are the same, right? It's a wastewater treatment process all across the board. Whether it's our new treatment plant or it's an on-site system, cold weather is just not friendly to wastewater treatment. So the process slowed down, and you probably see effluent numbers closer to 10 to 13, maybe creeping up towards 15 milligrams per liter in the dead of winter. But if you look at average performance over the course of the year, that's where that 7 to 8 number comes in that I was talking about earlier for these wood chip technologies. So that's the key difference, wood chips. It's very simple.
How long do they, I'm sorry, Paul.
What's the lifespan on the wood chip
Yeah, I suppose.
component?
So there's an interesting, I have to start with a little anecdote. There's an interesting show that used to be on TV. It was called Swamp Loggers, right? And these guys would go into swamps and like drag logs that have been sitting there for hundreds of years. They were cut down, during the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. They sank in the muck, and they're still basically pristine logs, right? That's because under anaerobic conditions, this stuff doesn't break down very quickly. The fungi, they really need aerobic conditions, so it more or less just sits there. If you do like the basic stoichemistry on these systems, there should be like 100 years worth of carbon in the wood chips for these systems to function off of. So that's like the chemistry limit of how long the wood chips should last. If you look at it more practically, you're probably talking 20 years. Let's just say, we'll be super conservative and say, it's a 20% reduction from what you might expect a full lifetime. But because these technologies are tanks and there are wood chips just there, you could, in theory, and this is kind of the maintenance process that's been suggested by the vendors, bring in a vac chuck, suck all the wood chips out, put new wood chips in, and away you go again. So that's, 100 years on the outside and 20 years if we're being really conservative in our numbers.
With an easy swap out, actually.
With an easy swap out, yeah. Yep. And Cape Cod produces plenty of wood chips, so we'll never be out of wood chips, particularly with those pine beetles around.
And it doesn't matter what kind of wood.
It doesn't,
Doesn't
yeah,
matter.
if you look at the
Pine,
data,
oak, whatever.
pine, oak, yeah, all the woods, there's not an appreciable difference between the different types of woods. Some research has been done on like corn cobs and stuff like that has a lot more cellulose and less lignin. Those materials actually remove nitrogen a little bit better, but their lifetime is shorter because they just break down a lot quicker. So wood is like the perfect one.
Even at 20 years, you'd think you'd existing septic systems now, they're gonna fail and you're gonna have to turn them over anyway, so.
Yeah.
That's,
And then if you look at the effluent quality coming out of these advanced systems, you're going to have a longer lifetime on your leaching field, and that's really the big expense with any on-site system is that component. So you should get a longer life out of your system just because you're using advanced treatment. And then really if you're thinking about replacing wood chips even let's say 15 years, it's a low-cost option for doing it. So.
Are there any technologies out there that are working on more phosphorus reduction in addition to nitrogen?
Yeah, so there are some in existence. The reason that they haven't really gained much traction, or we've seen a significant less amount of technology development in that area, is because there's no regulation really for it. There are, again, if I had my slides here, because I actually did include some phosphorus slides. So the main ones are like biological uptake and recycling. So the basic concept there is that you keep the phosphorus-laden wastewater closer to the surface of the soil. Title V was like the worst thing we could have invented for phosphorus removal, particularly on Cape Cod. So we all know we have beautiful sand. We really have beautiful sand in Mashpee. Like I can dig in my backyard and there's nothing, right? Phosphorus removal in soil really depends on what's called the cation capacity of a soil. And sand is about as poor a material, short of like gravel, right, for phosphorus removal. There's just not a lot of places for that phosphorus to stick to. So with Title V, we incentivize people to make their leach fields smaller by finding the best perking soil, which is also the worst soil for phosphorus removal, and encourage them to dig down deeper, closer to the groundwater. So it was like Title V solved one problem and created another rather large problem in the process. But if you can keep the wastewater closer to the surface, in the zone where we have more silts, more clays, more organic materials, things that have a lot more cation capacity, you can get a much longer lifetime just for holding phosphorus in that layer. You're also keeping it up in the root zone where the plants can actually take it up and grow. And if you're talking about a lawn, like you could mow the lawn, bag it, we could compost it somewhere, and you're actually removing phosphorus that way too. So that's one way. It's just
Is that like the pressure dose systems?
pressure dose systems. Like there's a couple really shallow ones. Drip dispersal is one of those, where you're keeping it like 6 to 8 inches below the soil surface. There's one called Geomat by a company called Geomatrix in Connecticut. It's a really thin mat-like material that's, again, close to the surface. So that's the key there, is it's like, you're within a foot of that surface layer. One of the cool things about the drip dispersal system is you can actually trench it in without disturbing the soil at all, which is really the key to keeping all those nice silts and clays up near the surface. So Geomat, you would have to strip everything out and then lay it down. Hopefully you've left some of the good material there. Drip dispersal, you can trench it in, you can put it in fun patterns if you really wanted to. So that's kind of a nice option. One of the other methodologies is electrochemical. This is where you're relying on either an iron plate or an aluminum plate to liberate ions using an electric charge, which then bind with the phosphorus in the incoming wastewater. And you're turning it to like struvite or vivianite, depending on what type of what types of plates you're using. And there's a couple ways that you need to treat it after that to really sort of remove it from the wastewater stream. So when it's in liquid wastewater, you've got iron and phosphorus floating around. They'll bind together, but they don't mineralize readily when it's in wastewater that's anaerobic. So you've got to provide some sort of an oxygen atmosphere. Some technologies will use a sacrificial filter, so it'll cause the phosphorus to sort of precipitate onto the filter. Some of them, there's one called FujiClean, which is a technology there's a few in Mashpee, if I remember correctly. They're like a 3-segment tank system, and they have their phosphorus plates in the beginning. So now you've got iron-bound phosphorus that travels through into the aerobic section, and then it'll precipitate out there. And There's another technology called Waterloo ECP, which is electric plate-based, but it relies on the oxygen in the soil absorption area for that precipitation to occur. So it's actually precipitating out in the leaching field. So there are probably at least three technologies that rely on electric plates like that for the removal. The last technology is we are actually adding, it's kind of a neat technology. We're hoping, it has some promise, but it's kind of gotten a little hung up. It's pretty simple. It involves adding alum to a septic tank. I mean, we all know you put alum in a pond to help resolve the phosphorus problems there. It's a similar thing. You add alum into a septic tank, it binds with the phosphorus and precipitates it into the septic tank itself. One of the problems we're finding with that, though, is alum contains aluminum, which is a regulated compound in wastewater. So they're trying to figure out how to address. It's really good at the phosphorus removal. Now we've got this aluminum problem that he's trying to figure out how to deal with. So those are like the main modes of phosphorus removal in on-site systems. When you get to bigger flows, you can do biological uptake, et cetera. So, yeah. As I said, those technologies, they exist, but they haven't gained much traction because there's not much of a requirement to install them. And if there's no market, the companies aren't going to invest much in getting their technologies approved here. So until somebody says you must, then they're going to kind of stay there.
So the best systems right now are the Nitrex and the Nitro systems.
For nitrogen removal, those are the top two candidates we have right now. I'm hopeful that there are others that are looking at this and saying, those existing players that are saying we're going to be left out of the market if we don't come up with something. So I know that there are at least a couple companies that are actively trying to figure out how to adjust their processes for better nitrogen removal. That's a good thing for us because I want more than two for our region. And really, when you look at where those two are in terms of approvals, we only have one that's really a serious contender. That's the nitro, and that's furthest along in approval process. So we need more than one.
A question on the testing protocol for DEP where they have to put in 50 systems, you said.
Yep.
Is there any criterion associated with that, or is it just whatever, 50 in general, like as far as like
It's
different site conditions or anything like that?
It's a mix of site conditions. They don't put a whole lot of stipulation. It's hard to get 50 in the ground,
I would imagine.
generally speaking. Because when you're doing provisional, the homeowner's taking a chance, right? Because the regulation says if that fails to do what it says it was supposed to do, you have to put in a general use system. So some people are hesitant to take that leap. That company has been very good at pushing systems. Like they've gotten like I said, 200 in. Most of them are over on the vineyard. So yeah, they have a good mix of different ones. If you go on masstc.org, if you want to see the data for yourself, we have a data viewer on there where you can play around with this a little bit. So you could say, I want to look at Nitrex or Nitro or FujiClean. And you want to look at single family homes, and you want to look at how much nitrogen removal each of them has. You can kind of play around with the data viewer on there and kind of look at it yourself. That's what I always encourage people to do. So,
Question for you, but kind of changing subjects a little bit. With the increased storms and flood events, I know there's a lot on the Cape, there's a lot of septic systems and flood zones.
mm-hmm.
Have you heard of any failures during storm events or after storm events or anything like that?
They definitely exist, and it's something that I do have a lot of concern over, particularly as we're looking at potentially investing large amounts of money in this, really in any type of wastewater treatment infrastructure. But if we're going to be placing these systems close to the coastline, it's not even just what is the effect on the performance, but if you have, if you have a system that relies on a control panel, if we have let's say a hurricane that comes through and now we have 50, 100, 200 of this technology was along the coastline and now has been inundated or something like that. Do we have panels that we can replace quickly? Do we have air blowers that we can replace quickly? If they have a pump chamber, you have 72 hours of capacity for your wastewater. You know, the power's out for more than a week. Can we get out to those people and get them, you know, running again? There was some research done in Rhode Island through URI that I can share with you that looked at like saltwater inundation of leaching fields and things like that. I don't have the, you know, the data on the tip of my tongue for that particular piece, but I'm happy to share that all with you. But it's a concern, and I don't think it's been looked at closely enough. Trying to find some grant money to put together a project to look at that. How can we design systems better in those areas to make sure that we're protecting them properly? You know, do we need to put the control panel higher up? Do we need to, you know, think about how we protect the air component? And then how do we recover from a potential disaster going down the road? Because like I said, I hate for us to put in a bunch and then have a major problem on our hands. When we have another Hurricane Bob, that'll eventually happen.
Yeah, we're dealing with that a lot here in Mashpee.
Yeah.
A lot of systems in flood zone areas. So.
Yeah, and that's your target area, so they're all right in that that area of concern.
Has there been any ahas, Brian, as they've been testing these kind of 3 systems, the nitrogen?
Could you repeat the first
Is
part?
there any kind of like ahas, like, oh, that's interesting, or that didn't quite work the way, or they've been going through the testing?
So I would say the biggest aha. So we've been, you know, we test a lot of systems at the test center. We also do a lot of work with field systems. One of the biggest ahas is that incoming wastewater from a household is much higher than most people have assumed. If you look at the way the models have calculated out influent, they're probably landing somewhere around 45 assumed coming straight out of the pipe from the house, right? 45 milligrams per liter. We put ports into septic tanks for all the systems that we test, and if you average the amount of nitrogen coming out of a septic tank, it's usually closer to 80 milligrams per liter, which is much higher than the assumptions that we're seeing. If you look down at Chesapeake Bay, the Chesapeake Bay project, they're doing a lot of the same work. They assume incoming influent is like 60 milligrams per liter. So the numbers that we've been looking at and assumed effluent from homes is much lower than what it actually is. So that's one of the biggest aha moments is we're doing something wrong in our calculations. And I talk about it everywhere I go, hoping somebody will say, well, maybe we should kind of think about this a little bit more, but yeah. The other thing is really putting a lot more effort into workforce training and development, and making sure that designers and installers are very familiar with the technologies that they're installing so that they get installed properly. So many installers are used to throwing in Title V systems left and right all day long. And then when you come to these technologies that are more advanced, you have to be more on point with your installation process. You can't cut corners in your installation process. You know, we've seen tanks that weren't bedded properly and, you know, sank on one side a little bit and cracked pipes. We've seen backflow coming into tanks, particularly with air components. They're not bedding just air lines properly, and air lines are being snapped at manifolds that need to be repaired. We really need to bring our installers and designers up a notch in order to successfully do these things. So those are like 2 of the bigger ones. There's been a lot, but you know, we're underestimating nitrogen, and we need to do a much better job with installation of technologies to make sure they're functioning properly.
Great. Thanks, Brian. Anybody have any other?
If you were to
Questions?
look into your crystal ball, and never, you know, we'll never hold you accountable for this answer, but when these 3 come online, what do you think the uptake will be? Do you think they'll be commercially successful?
I think the Nitrex system has been more successful in other parts of the country. Massachusetts is a really tough location for companies to get approved, so a lot of them just go elsewhere. It's been successful in other parts of the country. Down in Suffolk County, Long Island, it's been somewhat successful. They just don't have the number of systems that they need in Massachusetts to get approval, even within 3 to 5 years. So they're a ways off. Nitrex works well, but there's just not volume to get to the approval stage that they need to get to. Nitro, they started in Massachusetts, so they've already got a handicap of trying to get approval in Massachusetts. I think they will get a general approval in the near future. I don't know exactly where it's going to end up. I have some concern over their capacity to build systems in a short period of time, because they're still a very young company. Like they've started within the last 7 years. It was a couple of engineers from Alcoa, and the first prototype was at the test center, and they started out basically hand manufacturing the systems, and they're still manufacturing the systems right now. So
scale.
they
Scale.
they have a scaling problem that they're going to have to get over in order for us to really be able to rely on them moving forward. With some of the other technologies, and this is why I'm hopeful that some of these will now say, well, I want to be in that market, is a lot of these are bigger companies that have been established for 30, 40 years and have manufacturing capacity in place. They just don't have the technology yet. So I'm hopeful that those companies will come along and they can spin up more quickly and then be sort of ready to run. So that's
Like
kind of...
AV from Ford, right?
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, the current one, they're like Lamborghinis. They're all handmade. We need a Ford. We need a manufacturing line and just crank these things out. So it's one of the reasons when DEP posed those regulation changes, inside we all knew that was never going to work, because the technologies they were talking about using just were not, even within 5 years, we were not going to have technologies that could roll off the assembly line fast enough. So it would have been a failure. Thankfully, everybody's done a watershed permit at this point, so we never have to see that come to pass.
Sarah, do you have anything?
I do. Thanks, Steve. Before we release you, Brian, thank you. This was really
Really
informative
helpful.
You're very
and,
welcome.
and really, really cool science about the wood chips. It reminds me of all the nerdy stuff around composting that I studied with the carbon and the nitrogen balance.
Mhm.
I had well, first of all, would you be able to email the slides that we weren't able to see maybe out? I don't know if there's a way to make them available to the public too.
Yeah, I'm happy to email those. Yeah.
That'd be great. And then where could a little old resident access the DEP approved systems for best available nitrogen reducing technologies? Is that something that is kind of readily available? Or?
It's all on the DEP website. I think if you just Google, probably the easiest way is best available nitrogen reducing technology.
Okay.
You could probably put Massachusetts on it, but if honestly, they're the only ones using that term, so you'll find it that way.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, fair enough. And just a couple really simple questions. So do the urine diversion systems, do they rely on power as well, or is it just the infrastructure to divert the urine into the tanks?
So it can be either way. They can be entirely gravity. So at MassTC, we have actually urine diverting urinals there that are fully gravity run. The toilet fixtures themselves, the poop part is a flush. It tends to be a flush. The pee part tends to be gravity to a tank. So a lot of the times what we're talking about is you could put the tank in your basement. That's first option, right? And a lot of people that are sort of piloting these technologies are doing that. The other alternative is you could put a tight tank out in your yard and just have everything gravity feed to that for urine. That's how our system is set up at MassTC. If your household is set up such that you couldn't easily gravity flow, like let's say you just had a crawl space or something like that underneath, you might need to do a tank, or there are some low volume water flush systems that are available as well. But then you have dilution of the urine, which kind of makes it less of a useful product for fertilizer, because you want to try to get as much water out and make it as cheap as possible to transport. So So there are options, but most of it's gravity, and most of it wouldn't rely on power except for maybe venting the urine tank to keep the smell out of the house or something like that.
And so would that be, I mean, I've only seen really small scale, urine diversion systems like it. So would that be maybe a viable option as we're thinking about floodplain and thinking about the next hurricane Bob and some alternatives? And I wonder if is the technology, and you said that the management of the effluent or, whatever we're calling it, the urine, is that in place here if if applicants wanted to be creative about upgrading their on-site waste management systems? Like, is that an available option that is kind of hurricane forward thinking for floodplain?
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be, if you're using tight tanks, they would be fairly not as susceptible to flooding. Obviously, they'd have to be ballasted and all that if they're partially empty, but then you would only really be concerned with your standard system that's handling your gray water. In terms of the management piece of things, it's still in the very early stages of development, but there is one company that's actively collecting urine and turning it into fertilizer in the state. There are actually 2 registered fertilizers already. One is called We Bloom, and I forget the name of the second one. They're actually like a powder fertilizer. And if you ever want to come and see this stuff, we have it at the test center. Like, if you want to see urine diversion fixtures, we have them, and you can, try them. We have compost toilets set up out there. I'd always welcome you to come out, and if you want to actually see things in action, I can come and talk. But coming out to the test center is definitely a different experience. So I would encourage you to, if you're able.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Just take it on that. So the Cape Cod Aqua Fund that you mentioned, is that available to pay for conversions to urine diversion systems or to install the nitro or the nitrex systems, or is that just for standard Title V or IA systems, I guess?
It would be available for it wouldn't be available for urine diversion yet. We're still working through that with the state. On the IA technologies, if you have a failed system and you're required to upgrade, then you can apply for Aqua Fund. It has to be a failure in some way, shape, or form, and that could be like a failed leach field hydraulic failure, or it could be that the town has said these standard systems are now failing to protect the environment from nitrogen, so that also qualifies as a legitimate option.
And both of the systems that you mentioned that are in here pre-approval, would those be eligible for?
Yeah, if a town says you have to upgrade for nitrogen reduction as part of like a bigger town plan, right, like a watershed permit or something like that, then that would be the
But
sort
given
of
these are provisional approvals, the fund would still,
Yep,
would
you could
do a
still do those.
provisional?
They're
Okay.
on the they're on the state list, so you could do those. Yep.
And so, just another question about the phosphorus removal. So I'm thinking about the down to the surface, are mounted systems in general more beneficial for phosphorus removal than the ones that are at grade?
If you're using sand, you're probably not getting that much more, and most mounted systems are just sand. You're just building up and putting Title V sand in a box, really, is all you're doing. And
Right.
you'll get some removal at the beginning, but it'll eventually break through.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. And so, one more question, thank you for indulging me. So I think just to close this out, a lot of this hinges on the policy piece, right? So if towns like Mashpee were to reduce the maximum allowable nitrate concentration to one that is only achievable by some of these new technologies, that would be one of the inroads for increasing the availability and the affordability of these technologies for residents. Is that fair to say?
I would say so. The more requirements that are out there, the more opportunities for the companies to make sale. I mean, for marketing, it comes down to sales for these companies, and it allows them to increase their capacity for manufacturing, et cetera. it's a business world, so they need to position their company for investment, et cetera. And if there's a market that's obvious for an investor, they're going to invest. If there's not a market obvious, they're not going to. So, you know, it is,
Sure, but
it is,
then, like capitalism aside, these
Yep.
systems are, the data is sufficient to indicate that they are much more effective at protecting our
Yes.
waterways from nutrient loading than the current systems that we require, correct?
Yep, yeah, definitely, yeah. You can, like I said, you can look at the data on the Mass TC website for yourself. There is an EPA report for a project we did in Barnstable. It's called the Shubal Pond Project. We did that in conjunction with the Barnstable Clean Water Coalition, EPA, USGS, and the Nature Conservancy. They installed 13 advanced nitrogen removal systems, and we monitored those. We are still monitoring those monthly for the last 3 years. Performance on those, it's all in that. It's an EPA report, and but I can include that and send that to you as well.
That'd be great.
Yeah,
That'd be great. Thank you
Yep.
very much, Brian. Thank you for your time.
you're welcome. Happy to.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you
You're very welcome.
Very good job at making very technical stuff digestible.
I
I
tried.
got it.
Spent way too much time thinking about this stuff, so you know.
All right,
Thank
thanks
you
for
so much for
coming.
having
Have a
me.
good
Yes.
evening.
Again,
Thank you.
Thank you.
you've got my email address, right, Brian?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah, thank you.
Okay. All right, so we're just going to go back up to the pre and post hearing agenda. First one, approval of draft minutes from November 13th. So it's myself, Sandy, Paul, and Rich. So Rich isn't here, so we have 3 out of the 4 of us.
That's good enough.
Yeah, we got quorum. So Paul, Sandy, do you guys have any changes on these minutes that are in the package here? Any?
I
Nothing?
sent some earlier, so the second draft incorporated them, so I'm fine.
Yeah, I looked at the second draft. I didn't see anything there that was an issue at all.
Okay, great. So do we have a motion to accept the minutes of November 13th?
So moved.
Okay, do we have a second?
Yes.
Okay, motion made, second, and roll call vote. Paul?
Yes.
Sandy?
Yes.
And I vote yes. All right, next item, finalization of the 2026 calendar for the meeting. So everybody should have one in their packet, along with the calendar. So,
I didn't see that one looking through the email. Entirely possible I missed it, but is it possible to put it up on the screen?
I unfortunately can't screen share anything. I don't know what's happening with Zoom with that function, but it's not allowing me to screen share anything, unfortunately.
Oh, okay, okay.
But I know that Elizabeth sent it out to everybody.
Yeah.
So if you want to check your email, see maybe it got routed to a junk folder or something.
Yeah, I missed it. Does anybody happen to have a date that email went out handy?
It was this week, but I don't.
It was this week,
Yeah.
probably like
Okay.
Monday, I would assume. Yeah.
yeah, earlier in the week.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then,
Oh, I got it. Okay.
okay.
Thank you.
So we have all the dates. I thought they looked good. Now, any questions on the dates?
And she did keep it down to,
It was 21.
as was this past year, one meeting date in July,
Yeah.
one meeting date in November and December, just for
Which
consistency.
matches up. Okay. Is everybody good with the 6:30 start time, or do we want to change it?
Well, we've been in different slots from here,
You
there,
were
and
at 6
everywhere.
one time, but
Where some of the meetings do run late, I'm wondering if we should consider going back to 6.
Is that hard
Pick
for
up?
workers to make? Like Sarah?
Yeah. I know.
Not me. It's just me. I'm not I think 6 would be fine, just to 6:30, Thank you for asking. And then the quarterly meetings are not listed here. Do we have proposed dates for this as well?
No, we
no,
can,
that was something we weren't sure, to
Okay.
put down in draft form. We wanted to have a discussion with all of you to see what would work best as a group consensus, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay.
One thing I'll say on that, when I went through the list last year, it was hard to find gap so that you weren't meeting like 3 weeks in a row, because you're kind of surrounded by the regular
yeah, I wrote
mission
down,
business.
I wrote down a few dates.
Yeah.
So, I don't know, I'll mention these dates to see if everybody likes it. So the
Okay.
first one I had was February 26th. That's 3 in a row. And then there's March 5th, so that might be 4 in a row, so I don't know if that would,
February 26th, and what was
I
that?
don't know if that would work, but.
Well, can I pose a question to the commission here? So if we have in July and November, just one meeting,
Yeah, those would be
could
good.
we not do that for Q1 and Q2? And then just have the quarterlies as the second meeting that month?
This quarterly makes the second meeting in November, so.
Yeah. You're right, yeah. In November. We
But,
could,
Yeah, at least you would avoid the stretch of
yeah,
2 or more in a row.
right, yeah.
We would lose 2 in public hearings, but we would maybe in their place just have the quarterly meetings? Does that maintain our compliance with everything?
Well, compliance is really your discretion. There's no compliance. It's whatever you feel as a commission is an appropriate number of quarterly meetings, or meetings aside from normal permit hearings, that's just your discretion. There's no
Oh,
benchmark or anything to.
To how many public meetings? I guess I just would be curious about how that might impact that 21-day window. I mean, I know most applicants sign a waiver saying that we can put them on an agenda.
Yeah, well, the frequency of meetings is really the commission's discretion. The 21-day would still apply.
Right.
But, being down to one meeting a month, you're not going to run afoul of that 21-day, I wouldn't think.
Do we need to do it quarterly?
Yes.
Do we do it like 3 times a year?
Well, the 3 times, that's an interesting,
Well, if the regular meetings get less busy, we'll have more time during those meetings to discuss stuff, so I think we could go down to,
Yeah.
Yeah, because I was just looking at the dates, and, January, like the one I just mentioned, February, that's not gonna work, because that would give us like 4 in a row. January, but I was thinking, well, you look in April, we have April 2nd, and then it's April 23rd. So could we do like April 9th or 16th and say, okay, that's a first, instead of quarterly, I'll just call it update meeting, so we meet in April, and we're not jamming, because I'm looking at February and March are kind of jammed in, tight there, so I said, okay, that wouldn't be bad, and then we could do one in July, then we could do one in November, and then we're just sticking to 2 per month there. The only one would be, April would have 3, but the only 2 would be back to back.
Right, right.
And one would be the quarterly, so,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
Does that sound
yeah.
reasonable?
So April 16th?
that sounds, yeah.
Sounds
Can I just ask a process question? So we've kind of, since I've been around, which is shortest of everybody, these are good for us to talk about friction points and things that, we want to kind of hash out and things like that. So in the event that we go to 3 and we have something come up, is it hard for us to put an ad hoc meeting? Like if we needed to be able to needed to get together to have a discussion outside of the,
Yeah, so
is it
for like,
easy
for
to
the-
do that?
If it's, I can ask the town clerk,
Yeah.
she would really be the authority on that.
Yeah.
The process for like unplanned meetings, but I know that you have to have an agenda set 48 hours in advance, so
Yeah.
that applies. And as far as like advertising in the paper, which is the other component of
Yeah.
open meeting law, if it's just discussion about what we take up in quarterly meetings, I don't believe it has to be advertised in the paper. You only get advertising in the paper if you're talking about permitting.
Permitting, oh, good,
So
okay.
you definitely have more flexibility
Okay.
as far as open meeting law with quarterly meetings and agendas thereof as opposed to regular permit hearings.
Yeah.
And then if something really needs to be tackled urgency, we can just plug it into a regular standard meeting.
Yeah,
That's
I
all.
just get, worried because we have to have the hearings, right? And some of those are marathon sessions.
So going back, I was thinking we could do April 16th, July 9th, and November 5th, those 3 dates.
July 9th
I don't know if that would,
and November
there's kind of some
5th.
separation.
What do you say?
Say
April
again,
16th.
Steve,
Yeah, say it
slow.
again.
Okay, so April
April
16th,
16th, yeah.
July 9th, and then November 5th. Kind of, because the July meeting is the 23rd.
Yeah,
So that's 2
good
weeks.
separation.
Yeah, so there's separation between us.
Yeah.
vacations of staff and, you know, us. Because if you look at the public hearing dates, there's 21 of them. Then you throw 3 more on, there's 24 meetings per year.
Yeah.
So, I don't know, does that, you fine with that, Sarah?
Yeah, works for me, Steve.
Okay.
Drew, does that July 9th interfere with vacation for staff?
I don't know, we'll work around it if it does. I don't usually have any consistent vacation plans. They vary greatly from year to year. It's usually the holidays like Thanksgiving and Christmas is when I usually take vacation, not in July. So
Okay.
want to go to a warm place in winter.
Yeah. And then, like you said, if something urgent comes up, we can just plug it right into it.
Yeah.
So November 5th, okay. I
Yeah.
was going to say, I can't read my own handwriting. I
Discussion of it.
was going to say the 15th is a Sunday.
Consensus on the 6 versus 6:30. I don't know if everyone weighed in on that yet, or if you
No,
think
I
that's
don't think they
We'll go
did.
back to that. Okay, so is everybody good with the dates and the quarterly dates?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Everybody, yes, yes, yes.
Make it so.
Good, Sarah, with that?
She said.
I'm good, yeah, I'm good. One follow-up question though, Drew, I don't know, to ask you on behalf of the whole department, is there a program with which maybe you or Dave and Elizabeth could send out like a calendar invite once these get finalized?
Calendar invite. We can look into that, yeah. You mean just for all meetings?
Yeah, just for all the meetings, just a calendar vote for all of us, so we've got maybe that would be awesome.
Or
Thank
we
you.
can talk, yeah, we can see if we can do that. I know that the town IT, when it comes to like the Google calendars, I don't know if they use that or not because of internet safety concerns, but we will certainly look into it and see if it's possible.
Fair enough, thank you.
Okay, so we're good on the dates. Are we good at moving up to 6 PM?
I'm good with it.
Good, Neil?
Yeah, I'm good.
Donna?
I'm
Sandy?
good.
Yeah.
I'm fine.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Earlier, better.
Yeah, Drew's good. Sarah?
Yeah, that works
Okay.
for me.
All right,
Some of them go late. It might be good to pick up the extra
half hour, yeah, definitely, okay. So we need a motion and a second to approve these quarterly minutes and the time change, correct?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that'll be, yeah, I think it'll be good practice to do that.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, so we have a motion for the public hearing date for 2026.
Yes, so moved for
Okay, do we
6
have-
o'clock.
And, yeah, so the hearing dates and the new time change to 6 PM.
Yep.
Okay. Do you have a second?
Second.
Okay, motion made, seconded. Go to a vote. Paul?
Yes.
Okay, Shauna?
Yes.
Sandy?
Yes.
And I vote yes. Okay. Excellent. Okay, so going down next to discussion, water quality issues. It's ongoing discussion item, anything there? We just talked water quality. So. Brian, anything there?
I didn't have anything to bring up in particular.
Okay. Next item we'll go down is the bylaw review subcommittee. So Drew sent out some background info to everybody. So, so the subcommittee was set up based on the background info and Drew and I's discussion in 2021, or it started
It was
2020, I think.
2020,
20.
and then it was at
Into
the end of
21.
2020 and into 2021.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it was set up as a working group committee and not a public committee where it has to be advertised and televised and so forth and so on. So, and then, so based upon that information, received a opinion from the, or an answer from the town manager about how working committees versus a public subcommittee operate.
Yep.
So, based on all the information and how, and it was set up by Drew, that this is just a working group committee. So, so Drew, since he set it up, he was in charge of it, and correct me if I'm saying all the wrong, if I say anything wrong. So Drew is the one that's running the committee and asks for volunteers for it, or depends on who he wants to put on the committee if there's no volunteers. So that's
Right.
why, so that's where the committee is right now. So if this commission decides that they want to change it and make it a public subcommittee, then it'll need to be advertised, televised, and so forth.
Well,
So
I don't think it
that's-
needs to be televised, but
Oh,
it
okay.
needs to adhere to the open meeting law.
Right.
Which is the creation of agenda, minutes, and reserving a room, 48 hours advance notice, posting of the agenda. But television is really, that's kind of discretionary with various committees and commissions, you know. If they want to be televised, I think it's an elective option if you want to be televised, which I wouldn't recommend for that. But I think it's, you know, my own opinion here is that I think it would be better if the commission adopted and formally voted to adopt a subcommittee. The reason I set it up as a working group was because we kind of wanted to meet at, you know, have the freedom to meet, you know, maybe more than once a week, or, you know, freedom of scheduling without having to create an agenda, without having to do minutes, so we could work through these regulations, you know, at our own pace, and not be burdened by the requirements of open meeting law. So that's why it was set up as a working group. And as such, you know, I was the one who, in the first meeting minutes that I sent out today, asked for volunteers to join that group. And then the subsequent meeting minutes that I had sent out were just additional discussion on that, but there was no formal vote to adopt a subcommittee. And that's why town manager agreed that this is a working group and not an official subcommittee of the commission. So, having said that, moving forward, you know, it's your choice if you want to keep the working group as is, or if you want to disband that and start up as a subcommittee. That's really what needs to be decided, you know, whether it's tonight or moving forward.
And we're talking about this in conjunction with redoing bylaws, right? This is the bylaw
Yes.
working group? Okay.
Yes. And I'm fine either way. It doesn't really matter to me. You know, I just know that, you know, when we first investigated this, we wanted to do it as burdensome-free as possible, which is why we didn't make it an official committee. It was more of a working group. But moving forward, it's your choice how you want to proceed with that.
Okay. Go around the room and get everybody's opinions and
Yeah.
thoughts on it, and go to Sarah.
My thought is to leave it as is. I would like to see a third commissioner come in, because we would still be under quorum. When it first started, I believe Brian Whedon and I were the first two to come in on the committee, and then Brad Sweet opted to help out. And then there was a point where Sandy and Alex and me were on there, and then Alex stepped off. Having just two commissioners can be problematic, because if somebody can't make it, now you're down to one, and it's hard to get the meeting going. So I'd like to have that third commissioner just as a pool, you know, another body there that can chime in. But I'm fine with the way, you know, the specifics of the committee, the way it's set up.
Okay. Thanks, Paul. How about you, Neil?
Yeah, I would agree with that. Seems like you could be a little bit more nimble without having the rules and regs to have to follow.
Yeah.
So
Okay,
I think
and
I
then,
would kind of leave it as is.
okay, because I know at, then what Paul's comment about adding a third commissioner versus having two staff members and two commissioners on it for four.
Mm-hmm.
Paul's saying three commissioners and one staff member. Right, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it would be fine either or. Not really too concerned if it was 2 and 2 or 3 and 1. Can it be 3 and 2? 3 commissioners and 2 staff, or?
That would be
are
the
you
maximum.
Yeah.
keeping it
That would be the maximum, 3.
Because staff doesn't count to open meeting, right? law?
that?
You guys don't count in our, is it just commissioners, or do we click over
If it's a
to?
working group, it's not dictated by the commission.
Okay,
It's a working group.
Group,
It's-
okay.
It's for operations, and therefore it's really staff, my choice as far as who serves and who doesn't.
okay,
That's the
So
biggest difference
everyone,
between
everyone would have a voice.
subcommittee
okay.
and a working group. A working group is not bound to the open meeting law. It was myself who formed it, and therefore whoever's going to volunteer to join it, it generally comes down to my decision.
And is that regardless of, like, could every commissioner be on a working group and not click, click over? I mean, it would be probably
When we
not
formed
good
this-
optics, but,
When we formed this, I think one of the things about limiting it, I think it was to 4, but I don't recall specifically off the top of my head, is when you get into a situation of too many cooks in the kitchen.
Yeah.
no.
And so
no,
4
and-
seems to
yeah.
be a reasonable number.
What's your thoughts on it, Caroline?
So I think I'm going to first agree that I think it should stay a working group and not conform to that. I think the only thing that I think we should think about, and I'm not even really wedded to it, is if you had it as an open meeting, right, and it conformed to published agenda and things like that, would, like, the friction that came up with the PBA and other people go away because of that, right? And is there, I think a working group and the ability to hash things out and have the sausage making be, we can get up to our elbows in it, is a good thing without the public being involved. But I think the other side of that is if the public at least has the ability to attend, do we take that kind of friction point off the table because of that? I would lean to a working group. I think adding one more commissioner to that makes sense because I think it just gives you another brain to add to it without it being cumbersome. And to your point, Paul, given that everybody else has lives beyond, this committee, gives us the flexibility to just keep driving forward as fast as possible.
I think it should remain a working group, too. And I wouldn't mind seeing another commissioner on just in case someone couldn't make it for, maybe, illness and it's more than just one meeting. Just gives, so that things can keep moving forward.
Consistency
Yeah,
too, right?
right.
If somebody has to bow
Right.
out because of
Right.
life, right?
And I don't know whether being a formal committee with hearings and all would help with the last Reg 25. I
Yeah.
think the friction was going
Yeah.
to be there whether
Yeah.
we had open meetings on that or not, just because of the subject matter.
Yeah,
It all went, it ended well, which is good.
Right.
yeah.
Okay, Sarah?
Yeah, thank you, and thank you, Drew, for sending out the background information. I think if the work that we're talking about of this working group is reviewing and revising our policies and our regulations, I think that whatever the administrative structure of the group is, it needs to be in the hands of the commission and not burdening the staff to manage, rather having the staff to support it. Because it's my understanding that that's the most appropriate division of responsibility. I also think that it needs to be transparent to the community. Nothing's more important than the opportunity we have on this commission to write and revise policies to continue to protect the resource areas. So I actually, and I don't think that having, structure, I don't see it as a burden. I think for me, as a person in a very busy stage of life, having the accountability of having that scheduled is actually very helpful at keeping things going. Otherwise, I have found, in my experience, things tend to kind of stall on their own because other things come up. So I'm going to have, I guess, what's the unpopular opinion, and say that I think we should transition this to a formal subcommittee so that it can be, you know, in the hands of the commission to manage, and then the staff gets to support it and then go and do a million other things that they have to do as staff members, and so that we are able to be more transparent, so that it can be that we're really going to support it.
Okay, thank you. My opinion is that I agree. I'd like to keep it as is. I think it's working well. I don't mind having another staff member on the committee because, Dan is, a fairly recent hire, and he's learning. And, Drew's, as Drew mentioned, he's coming up on 20 years here at the town of Mashpee, which is excellent. But, Dan needs to learn and come along. So I'd like to see Dan on the committee, for, maybe it might change in 2 years from now. Things might, change with Drew or Dan himself, but, I think he needs to learn and help out, because if for some reason that Drew is, say,
Wins the
okay,
lottery and goes away?
hey, I got 25 years in, I'm gonna retire, and then Dan steps in, Dan needs to know a lot of this stuff. It does make sense to have, more commissioners on it, but I think at this point in time, to have Dan step in and learn a little bit more about the bylaws, because in a few years, he might be taking over. Not to kick Drew out, but I'm just thinking down the line.
Succession planning is an important
younger
thing.
man that's learning all the stuff, and he's very good. He runs this meeting great, and you talk to him, he's very knowledgeable. But I think he needs probably more education and on the bylaws and things like that. So that's my thought behind that.
And just to clarify, as far as, the working group and its capacity, it's not a decision-making entity, it's a recommendation entity. We've never taken a vote as a bylaw review subcommittee. It's always been a consensus. So there wouldn't be any vote-taking as this, if this is to remain a working group. It would just be arriving at a consensus, working together to, update and amend the regulations as necessary. The commission would always be the formal entity for voting and enacting any recommendations coming from the working group. So just to clarify that, because I don't believe from my memory we've ever voted on anything. We've never taken a motion, a second, and a vote, a roll call vote. It's always been, okay, we're happy with where we're at, let's forward it in draft form and move on. So.
Yeah, I think the transparency's there. I
Yeah.
mean,
And
what we talk
also-
about in each meeting is,
Right.
really just the grammar of it and the wording and whatnot,
Yes.
and then bring it forward, so.
And also, because I think, Shawna, you had brought this up from the public input perspective, they would not be allowed to attend a working group meeting if this was a public meeting body,
Yeah.
formally adopted by the commission and recognized and appointed by the select board. The public would have the chance or the opportunity to attend any meeting they wished. Having said that, it would be up to that bylaw review committee to entertain comments. Doesn't mean they can come in and say what they want, but they do have the opportunity to attend, a subcommittee that is formally established and appointed by the select board. That's the other piece, is that if this becomes a bylaw review subcommittee per open meeting law, it has to be presented to the select board, and the select board is the one that would, solicit volunteers and then appoint them officially, just like they would for this commission. It's the same kind of procedure.
Yeah. But the process that got followed for Reg 25 had draft revisions going out and being published on our formal meeting agenda, right? And we published drafts to the general public, and then anybody could come to the meeting and comment on those, right? So that's always going to have to be the backstop, to Sarah's point, to make sure there's transparency going on and nobody thinks that, there's this backroom, Tammany Hall situation going on, that we, are pushing things through without that. So
Yeah, so that would no longer be the case with the working group. We would not send out drafts to the public. We would simply wait for that process for the public comment hearing as part of the Home Rule Authority and the process to adopt changes to your bylaw or to your regulations. Bylaw requires town meeting warrant. Regulations, Home Rule Authority, and the chance for the public to weigh in or any documentation sent out to the public would have to wait until that process takes place. And the working group has done their part already. So that would need to conclude.
I think we get bogged down, the process would get bogged down if you did that.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. Because I think, you guys as a subcommittee did a great job on Reg 25. You say, okay, you spent time working through it and everything, and say, okay, now we have something we can send out to the public and the rest of the commission to look at, and, and then follow the whole process. It worked out really well.
Yeah. 25 was almost a complete rebuild.
Yeah, it was. It was
Typically,
a lot of effort.
like with 12 and 27, we just went in and changed this or that and
Right.
moved along fairly quick.
Yeah.
And there's a lot to do
Yeah,
still.
there is a lot to do. From my perspective, I would like to bring Dan on board at least for the next year to get him more exposure, because I am not going to be here forever, and I am looking at a timeline for when I'm going to move on, and I think it would be of great benefit to everyone if Dan had to have the opportunity to learn more and be part of this process at least for a certain time period. And then, after that, we can look at bringing somebody else in. But that's why I, brought up him as a candidate to begin with, is because I do want him to get caught up on the regulations and get more acclimated on that aspect of the job, so.
Do we need a vote on anything, or just a consensus?
Not if it's a working group.
Just a consensus, okay, so, all right, so the consensus is to
So
keep it,
relabel this.
keep it as it is, and
But take off subcommittee, right?
Right,
Yeah,
it's a working group,
you
yeah.
just call it
It's
working
called a
group.
Working group,
It's a working group.
And those meetings can continue by Zoom, correct?
yes. we can-
Which makes it easy.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's nice because you can do it in the middle of the day
Yeah,
and
yeah.
you can still be doing stuff
Okay.
around the
And
house.
to bring Dan up to speed, we'll just add him in for, like you said,
Yeah.
hey, you want to do it for the next year or whatever, and we can look at it on a yearly basis.
Yeah.
To
And
say,
it
okay,
can be
what do you
flexible. If Dan can't make it to a meeting or I can't, we can bring one of the commissioners in who's available. I mean, it's totally flexible. We don't have to,
Yeah.
so I think that's,
So this working group now is Paul, Sandy, you, and Dan.
yes.
Do we need to have a volunteer as the backup person? So that,
I know Sarah had expressed interest in joining, so. But we can keep it flexible as far as it could be Sarah, it could be anyone who's available if one of us can't attend. But
Yeah, how's your schedule, Sarah? During the day, are you
Oh, it's a circus.
circus?
But, with enough notice, I can absolutely fit things in. And I am still interested in serving on the working group, so, I'll put that forward and you all let me know what that can look like. I don't have the ability to oftentimes pivot, for a meeting. I need about 24 hours notice.
we can do that.
Yeah, but other than that, I can definitely fit it in. Yeah. And especially if you guys don't mind seeing my kids on the screen.
Okay.
They
Okay,
have lots to say about it.
so that would work, so we got the four, and then Sarah would be the designated backup person?
Yep.
Okay,
The alternate.
okay, good. Okay. Okay, next item, moving along, is the submittal requirements update. So this is the notice of intent checklist. I think Dan sent that out to everybody. Do you have that, Sarah?
Yes,
Okay.
thank you.
So, again, this relates to my inability to have Zoom display this, so Sarah, I apologize that you can't see this. I just made a couple of notes on the checklist, because I talked to Dan about this, and I just wanted to get the commission's just to get some clarification on some of the edits that Dan had provided. So, starting with at the top where it says any applications that are missing the required information below will not be placed on the hearing agenda for the upcoming meeting. So when you look at, I agree with this in spirit, so to speak, but as far as requirements, I just want to be cognizant of that 21-day statute that is under 310 CMR 10.05, Section 5 procedures. So it states that the commission must hold a hearing on a permit application within 21 days of receipt of permit application. The language isn't super specific about what receipt means, but I did talk to council about this a while back, and they basically said if it's in the mailroom, it's considered received, even if it's not dropped off at our desk, or if it's an envelope that hasn't been opened. Received means it's been received.
In the building.
In the building, yeah. So, I don't think that this, like, if we were to encounter, we read through a notice of intent, we see it's missing, and in that 10.05, it says, I forgot the specific language, but minimum submittal requirements, I think, is used to describe a notice of intent application. So that means checking off all the boxes and all of the applicable, questions or criterion in the application itself. As far as like a project narrative, I don't know if minimal submittal requirements includes that as well. I just know as per the form and filling out all of the required fields, that's considered minimum submittal requirements. Everything else on top of that is, the plan of record, the project narrative, the GIS plans, and all of those things that are also included. So I don't have a problem with the current wording. I just wanted to make the commissioners aware that, we do have the 21-day statute, and we just want to be cognizant to not, miss that in any occurrence. And it also says, and I was kind of surprised to see this because I wasn't aware, the commission can actually require a continuance without the permission of the applicant. If you see, so you could say.
So why do we write it just that way? That if any incomplete.
That's what I was going
Yeah,
to suggest, was you can just continue. I know there's concern about applications coming in that are missing information and questions, why are they being placed on an agenda? But I think it's simple enough to just continue, and then you guarantee you're not going to run afoul of that 21-day statute. I think it's a safer play, so to speak, but just wanted to put it out there for your discussion.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good idea. So we should say any applications that are missing the required information below will be continued.
Yeah. Your project may be delayed, or, could be continued, some language like
Continued,
that.
yeah,
That we can.
until all
Yeah.
material is
Right,
submitted, right? Or-
Yeah.
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 Okay.
I would agree. I think that's a great declaration to make, and good to know that that's an option that we have.
Yeah,
I also see here on the check, the item that says all plans must be submitted at least 5 business days prior to the scheduled hearing date is listed under the engineered plans bullet, and I wonder, are we able to move that up to the top so that it applies to all of the plans? In thinking about, maybe we get the engineered plans, but the landscape plan comes in the afternoon of the hearing, right? So I think that 5 business days is critical for us as volunteers to have the ability to review it adequately and do a site visit and have all the information that we have, so.
Yeah, I agree, Sarah. I think that's correct. Yeah, that should be at the top, too.
what was this? Sorry.
It's underneath here for engineer plans. All plans are submitted.
Oh,
5
9
business
copies,
days.
okay. Move
All-
that to the
all-
top.
All information.
We should say all documents must be submitted at least 5 business days prior to the scheduled hearing date.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
And then,
Because that's one of the issues, Sarah, that I think we've been dealing with for the last couple of years is they come in and we're missing information and we can't make an informed decision.
right, well, and, it's difficult when you get something a couple days beforehand, or you've already gone out to look at the property, you're getting
Right.
revised information right up to the end. So if it's possible, it would be great to find a way to communicate those filing deadlines and have it apply to all of the necessary documents.
What was the other thing that you mentioned before I interrupted you?
Oh, no, thank you. I just had one other comment on the second to last check, proof of filing with the ZBA. Do we want to request or require proof of filing with all of the other relevant town boards and commissions? I know that they have to file first. They don't necessarily have to be heard first before it comes to conservation, but don't our bylaws require that they file before they come to conservation?
Besides CBA, you're talking about like health department?
Yeah, Board of Health, Planning Department. That's my understanding. But
Because the next one about the, for all water-dependent structures, it mentions 5 days there prior to a scheduled hearing. Is that enough time for the shellfish warden and the harbor master and everything?
Yeah, let me see, waterways and shellfish companies and areas. I wanted to change that to plans involving water-dependent structures that require shellfish, DNR review will say, should be provided to them at the same time when an application is dropped off to conservation.
Okay.
Not
I
any
agree with
later than that,
Yeah.
yeah, no,
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay, so we'll take that out.
yeah. Where does it say that currently?
It's under
Second,
the last one,
yeah,
above the
Copies.
signature page.
Yeah, yeah, okay.
But Sarah, you
Yeah, I
wanted
changed
to
it
throw in
already,
the health
actually.
department along with CBA?
well, I believe so. I mean, isn't that correct? Don't we say that, wasn't there an amendment? Oh, gosh, I'm not remembering the date, but Paul, maybe you can back me up here. Was it 2012? There was, originally the language said that everything had to be filed with other departments, and the Conservation Commission heard the applications last. And then there was a provision made that said because of, filing delays, that it just had to be filed with all the other relevant.
Yeah, it was, the wording was obtained, it was in the bylaw, actually. It was
Right.
obtained was the original wording, and that got changed to applied for, or applied to.
Okay.
Yeah, because it was creating a burden. You couldn't, the applicant wasn't, various boards and committees have their own preference about who they want to hear from as far as other committees before they render a decision. So if you've got two boards, let's say ZBA and Concom, who say, we want to hear from you, the other one first, what is the applicant supposed to do in that situation?
Right.
So to at least reduce it to applied to, or applied for, kind of eases that burden.
Should we just say other relevant boards, or?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's fine.
That covers
Or
everything.
I was boards with cross jurisdiction, or, we can word it accordingly to include other, I think it's a good idea.
Yeah.
We get a lot of comments from Board of Health saying, we'll review upon receipt of application. That's kind of a boilerplate for a lot of, it would be
Right.
nice to see that they applied, and just like ZBA. So, yeah, I agree, it should extend to other boards, other committees.
Okay.
And I did have just another, this is 1, 2, 3, fourth one down. The original wording, or the proposed wording, was all resource areas, including flood zone, mean annual high water, 100-foot, 200-foot riverfront, as if applicable, and wetland delineation to be flagged in the field for inspection. Just to kind of simplify that, because there's other criterion, such as the 75 and 150 buffer zone setbacks, which also have to be included and staked out and included on a plan. So what I suggested was just kind of cleaner language, as per Chapter 172, Regulation 3, delineation and flagging of all wetland resource areas present on the subject property and the 75 and 150 associated wetland buffer zones thereof. That way you're not getting into a whole list of all the different types of wetlands, because that's not all inclusive in the original language. Just reference the regulation that includes all of those criteria. It's just cleaner that way,
Okay.
without getting into a paragraph or more of description on a checklist. Okay. And then the last one I had here, architectural and building plans are required for projects associated with new home construction, raise and replace of existing home structures and/or home additions. So the only thing that was missing from this in the original wording was new home construction. I don't think Dan put that in there, so I added that in. And my question to the commission is, are you requiring, because we need to know this to inform applicants, are you requiring architectural and building plans for every project that includes these types of activities, no matter what the resource area or just the flood zone. Because it seems to be most prominent in the flood zone, so you can see where the flood vents are or piers. But if you have a project that's in the buffer zone to a freshwater wetland or a pond front that does outside the flood zone, are you still requiring this? Because there is an expense to it, and the reason I'm asking this is because if it's not germane to your deliberation in a particular resource area, then is it still required? So I just want to clarify that. So is it across the board, or is it only in the flood zone?
Well, I definitely go for the flood zone. I was just thinking back to that small addition of the one where the guy's putting over the deck on John's Pond there. It was
Right.
pretty close to the pond.
Right.
And he said, oh, we're just putting it on piers and building over the deck. And
Yeah.
got to see that plan, because that was pretty close to the pond.
Sure. No, yeah, I mean, I'm not saying which direction, one or the other. I just want to bring it up for conversation, because if we're going to put it on this checklist, I just want to make sure that, this is, all or nothing, or just flood zone only. And it's only based on my observations that the majority of times you ask for a building plan or architecture plan, it's related to a flood zone issue. So I just wanted to put it out there. Is this also related to any other scenario?
Well, on one occasion, I think back where it was helpful, is that one that was on, was it 55 Redmond? That was right by the
Oh, yeah, Redwood Circle.
Redwood Circle.
Yeah, yeah.
That was
River.
a steep gradient.
Right.
Right,
So they're gonna be digging and saying, okay, if some of these projects, are you putting on sonotubes, you putting a foundation, then they're gonna excavate, you're
right.
gonna have erosion on steep gradients. So that was another one that was helpful
Okay,
to have a plan of saying, okay, what are you doing there to make a decision?
That was the one I was thinking about too. That was, because that wasn't floodplain, that was,
No, it wasn't floodplain,
Yeah.
but it was, going right down to the pond, so you're saying.
It seems to me we should require, because we don't, and they come and then we say, oops, we really need this, and they have to go and get it anyway. I mean, if it's any kind of substantial building or, even if it's new deck or whatever.
Yeah, especially like a house that's non-conforming, it's gonna be close
Right.
to a property line, the neighbor's upset, well, how high up is this going?
Yeah.
Or- I think it's good to have it right across the board.
Yeah.
Okay.
I know it's expensive, but it's the least of the expense of the
Okay.
project in terms of the cash outlay for what the people are proposing
Right.
to do.
wouldn't the building department require them?
They do, but
So-
generally speaking, architectural plans and building plans are finalized when review of all other relevant committees are finalized, so they can have a final building plan taking into consideration all of the concerns from other boards and committees. It's usually the last step. So to ask for that in mid-step, mid-process, I'm not saying it's not, warranted, but it may not be the final product either. Because from talking to the building commissioner, they usually get the architectural and building plans, once all the feedback has been provided from the various boards and committees, so it's a final product.
So what does the building department get, or to evaluate the project?
They get the
Maybe-
final set of stamped
Yeah.
building plans,
Right.
say in the flood zone.
Yeah,
And if we look at it and we say, oh geez, we want piling instead of a concrete foundation to help water flowing or cut down on erosion, and the zoning board looks at it and they want to make a change. So that applicant makes the changes before the plans get submitted for building permit.
So could we write this to be the same plans that get submitted to the building department? So every one of these things,
But we
right?
might be first up, so they won't know changes, right?
right,
That are gonna happen down the line, so
Yeah,
the
they
building.
might- ZBA might change something too.
right.
So the thing is, what we're covered by is the plans that are in the order of conditions, and it's a condition on saying, okay, here's a change on the plan. So Drew and Dan, when they look at the order of condition, and they tap it up, it's right in the order of conditions that you need this plan with pilings on versus the one that's submitted with foundation.
So
So
that
when
would
they
make
go-
us the last stop, right? of any building, any project that included building, we'd be the last stop
I would
because,
assume so, probably,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. So but the thing is, Drew has the sign off on the building permit application, so.
Right.
So you see, oh, they got concrete foundation, they don't have pilings as what we requested, then it stopped.
Yeah, then I don't sign off on a building permit and it doesn't get issued.
Okay.
Never gets issued until all departments click, you know.
I just want to
agree.
make sure we are understanding what we're asking for and where that puts us in the process, right? And that's what we intend, right, is the building department and the zoning board then would all have had, for us to get these architectural building plans, that would have all, but they would have gone through those two, they would have gone through, been in front of the building committee and the zoning board, right?
I can only assume so.
Oh, okay.
I mean, the biggest, most important question I had is coming into this, you know, and trying to figure out where this applies, is that if you have a project that comes before you, that's, let's just say, out of the flood zone, and it's some sort of structurally related project like a raise and replace or a new construction, and you're asking for building plans, and this is just my opinion, that request should be predicated upon a concern of impacts as per the Wetlands Protection Act, not height of a building, not setback from property lines,
Correct,
but
yeah.
a Wetland Protection Act consideration, because otherwise it could be considered an arbitrary request. So that's why I want to get clarification on that.
But if we write it to be floodplain only, right? It still doesn't, it still gives us the right to ask for a plan,
Well,
right?
that's
If
where,
we're-
yeah. That's why what I was kind of, you know, seeing what would be comfortable with the commission. Because there's going to be applications where a building plan probably won't reveal much impact or otherwise to a resource area than a site plan would already reveal, above and beyond that. So you wouldn't lose the ability to ask for that, but maybe that would be just in that category, that when it comes before you and we've had a chance to deliberate over it, you could then say, well, look, this information for building architectural is needed in order for us to make an informed decision based on impacts to the wetlands.
But then, if we had it, it might eliminate a continuance.
Yeah, I'm not saying one way is better than the other, but it could be something that maybe an expense could be avoided if it's not germane, but you still have the ability to say, come back and give us this. Whereas if
Yeah.
you're sure you're going to need that every time, like in the flood zone, you know, it could be worded as such, but.
Yeah, well, based on just my business and my experience, if anybody's coming in front of the commission with a site plan with doing an addition or a new house or whatever, they're gonna have a building plan, because that surveyor or engineer can't draw something on there until he has a building plan. So they're gonna have a plan already. It's not like they have to say, oh, we gotta go out and get a plan.
Sure.
They have it. So-
Yeah, I mean,
So
I don't
to
see any
submit it
harm.
is just,
Yeah,
you know.
I don't see any harm one way or the other.
Yeah.
It's your choice, your discretion.
Like,
So leave it as is.
yeah, we should have it.
Okay.
For everything.
I think that was it for the
Okay, so
visions.
everybody's good with the changes on the submittal requirements? I think that will streamline things and cut down a lot of issues. It seemed like in the last couple of years, we've had a lot of continuances because we didn't have enough information.
Yeah,
Or like Sarah said, they're submitting something on the day of the hearing.
right,
We've
right.
already been out looking at it and whatever, so.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, great, thank you.
Good job.
All right, so, and then last we have the updates. So
All
we'll
right.
write down the list and,
And again, I apologize for not being able to share this image, but I wanted to start out, this has to do with Red Brook. And Sarah, I apologize, you can't see this, but I'll describe it as best I can without the visuals. So as you all know, the Red Brook Road Culvert Replacement Project, this is right down here. This is Red Brook Road. This pink line is the town line between Mashpee over here and Falmouth. And this culvert is what is going to be replaced, and it's where they're getting pretty much to the final stage of, you know, preparing the notice of intent for that. you can all see in the image, and out of Sarah, if you've driven down Red Brick Road in this location, ever since the culvert failed, and it revealed more of a wetland old cranberry bog than a flooded bog as it once was before. So that's what this image shows. You can see all the bog ditches here. It's clearly used to be a cranberry bog. Same thing with this cell up here just north of this drained bog. The reason this one is still full of water while this one isn't is because, and this arrow should be further up, sorry, it should be pointing to right here. There is another culvert there. So that's retained the water in this flooded bog to the north of that. The reason why I bring this up is because when you go out to this site, someone or some people have taken it upon themselves to seal this culvert off, therefore preserving this flooded condition. Now that culvert was put in back when this was an active cranberry bog. To modify it when it's no longer got that agricultural exemption is considered a violation of the Wetlands Protection Act. So you can see these clamps here with plywood, various other pieces of lumber, and then a very large stone right here. It's still flowing through, but not nearly as much as it normally would. The reason this is an issue is because the other part of this project, which is currently being worked on, but still is a ways off as far as permitting, is to investigate once this culvert, this box culvert, is reviewed and approved, hopefully, because it needs to happen. It's a safety issue in addition to restoring natural flow. All these side lands here, these areas, these are all mostly association properties. They're all association properties on Mashpee side. And there's privately owned buffer zone areas here on the Falmouth side. In order for the consultant to get in and investigate the habitat restoration of this flooded bog, it needs to be drained because you can't get good assessment data in a flooded condition. So the reason I'm bringing this to your attention is because this is an existing violation, but it's a situation where we have to kind of tread carefully because we're working on trying to acquire these lands from private ownership, which they're currently in. We don't want to ruffle feathers. We don't want to, destroy relationships and progress that has been done. So my thought is, and I welcome your feedback here, there is an association here in Mashpee for this subdivision. Is it Seabrook Village Association, I think? Yeah. And I've had a lot of correspondence with the president of the association. He's been, very good to work with and, is in favor of restoration. And present this to him, through as just him and not reach out to the entire association, but he can funnel this through to other members as he sees fit to let him know about this. And that the plan is to remove those objects because it is an existing violation to clog up a culvert that's no longer in operation for cranberry bogs. It's not an agriculturally exempt activity anymore. Therefore, it's a wetland now. It's under wetlands jurisdiction. That's a violation. And it needs to be drained in order to do assessment moving forward for ultimately restoring this habitat to the creek that it once was, the brook, Red Brook. So that's my plan, just to kind of, bring up the subject. See if we don't know who did this. We don't know if it was someone from the Falmouth side or the Mashpee side. We have no idea.
Is the culvert on the Falmouth side?
I think it's on the Falmouth side. I don't know how reliable that red line is, it's as far as its exact location, but when you go out there, you can only access it from the Mashpee side. There's tennis courts in the Seabrook Village, and there's a trail that goes right to this berm. And when you're out there and you're looking straight across the berm onto the Falmouth side, the vegetation is so thick there's no pathway that's been created or anything.
Right.
So it looks like the access, at least, was definitely from the Mashpee side. But as far as who did it, we have no idea.
And is it recent, Drew, or do you think it's been there for
It's been that way for about a year.
a year?
Yeah,
But
I think
since, yeah.
shortly after this bog drained, when the
Because there
culvert
was
failed.
little rumblings at one of our hearings about, was the pond going to go back in, and everybody missed the pond, right?
Right.
So this is this.
So I think this was a reaction to when
trying to get the pond back.
the lower bog cell got drained. This was a reaction to say we want to preserve our.
The clamps look new.
So the clamps are, yeah. That's why I said it's probably less than a year. There may have been previous attempts that just didn't hold up, and now you got the clamps.
We have to
that it-
coordinate with Falmouth?
We are.
Okay.
Yeah, this got brought up at our last project meeting, which was just yesterday, with all the project partners. And this brought up as a question because Horsley Witten Group is the consultant here. They've been hired to look at the restoration component of this, and they're the ones saying, well, if that bog can be flooded, it can be drained, it'll make our job much, much easier as far as data collection. So, but it's a bit of a
Equals much
conundrum
cheaper.
because we don't want to upset the apple cart, so to speak, so it's,
So there you go, you're gonna get 2 clamps.
huh?
You're gonna get 2 clamps. Bring them home. Unclamp them.
Yeah,
go.
and
Yeah,
just
get
kind
2
of
clamps.
kick that rock over.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it.
But that's the plan, to kind of
Bring
do
Dan
this
with it, have some
low-key approach, not, because we want to secure these properties for restoration ultimately, that's part of the plan. And some of them are on the Falmouth side and some are on the Mashpee side, so it's, it gets a little,
Okay.
um,
So the game plan is to go out and
I'm going to reach out to the association president
get their approval.
and just present them the scenario, and present them with what we intend to do and get their feedback and kind of go, from there.
Okay.
Yeah.
You should present it though, Drew, as this is going to happen versus asking for
That's
permission.
exactly
Yeah,
what we
yeah, okay.
talked about.
Yeah.
Yeah, there isn't a choice here. It's
There's
going to
not a
happen.
choice, right?
But I
It's
am
gonna-
informing
okay.
you, I'm
Yes,
going
yes,
about
yes,
it
okay.
transparent
Okay, very
as much
good.
as possible. But just wanted to make you guys aware of that. If you-
Violation, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just a matter of time.
Right. So,
People are clever.
Sarah, did you have any questions on that? Okay.
I didn't, thank you,
Okay.
and I actually did get to see what you shared on screen.
Oh, you did? Okay, good.
Yeah.
So it's
the
sharing.
process is
Wonderful.
working. Yeah.
Oh, we should have had Brian share, because it was saying I can't share, so now in hindsight. Okay. Upper Quashnet Restoration, Horsley Witten is close to finalizing 50% level plans for the restoration of the Upper Quashnet, and they'll be contacting me to come into a meeting to present those to you and have public feedback, just like we did for the 25% plans. Does anyone have any questions on that? Upper Quashnet. Johns Pond and Santuit. So I sent you all, I think it was earlier today, a year-end report for Johns Pond milfoil that was sent to me by Water and Wetlands, our consultant on that project. And the report is good. There's no visible evidence of milfoil present. So
Good.
as you recall, the initial area was around 4.5 acres of infestation, mostly in the northern or southern part of the pond near the lagoon. And then there was a reinfestation or a reintroduction. Sent that off to town council, and town council had some feedback that I'm currently working on. But we're looking at scheduling wise, early to mid-spring, probably end of March, early April, when the treatment would start, because that's the most effective time of year when you're dealing with aquatic invasives. Does anyone have any questions on that? Good, okay. Choptake, moving along, the one thing about Choptake bogs that we didn't anticipate, and it's not necessarily a bad thing, is that the surface water hasn't receded to the point that we expected. So the wetland conditions are taking place, it's happening very slowly, but it's not quite lining up with the restoration plan. And the reason I say that's not really a bad thing, it's only a bad thing in relation to the expectations of the plan, but in terms of habitat value, when you have surface water like that as compared to an old fallow bog surface, you have lots of opportunity, habitat, and feeding opportunity for waterfowl. So this is providing just that. Any areas of open surface water is nothing but a good thing for waterfowl and other species. So we did get additional funding from the state to do some supplemental plantings in some of the midwater and deep water marsh areas associated with the restored bog. And we're going to see how that takes effect moving forward. And if anyone wants to go out there or have a tour, just let me know and I'll be happy to show you around and explain what the process is. There's also a beautiful interpretive sign that's been put out there. So, for all intents and purposes, it's a successful restoration. It just hasn't lined up exactly to the types of wetland mosaics that we expected to see at this point in time. That's not to say that's not going to occur in the future, but it just didn't line up timeline for how it was drafted out. But still,
Nature didn't go to plan?
nature didn't go according to plan, can you believe
God,
it?
it
It's
got-
amazing. Anyone have any questions on that? Good, okay. Local comprehensive plan, so Brian Tobin, the town planner, just sent that out for a draft review. So if anyone wants to see it, I can have them forward it to you all if you want to read up on the draft. And I think it's about 200 pages.